Okay, welcome to this meeting of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. We appreciate people coming in on a lovely summer day to be. The first thing we'll do, I think, once again, we'll acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional and never ceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, specifically Abeguit First Nation, for where we are right now. And further, like last time, they are still finding kids' remains underground across the country in these residential schools. So I invite you to join me in a short moment of silence to honor their memory. Thank you. Look forward to the time when we do not honor, well, anyway, when that is somewhat resolved. Okay, so call to order. Welcome. Is call to order in other language. Declarations of conflict of interest. Anybody in the ballpark here? Conflict of interest? Hearing none, we shall continue. I'd like to welcome Robert, our city planner, and Mr. Forbes, whose first name is just lost me. Anyway, we'll figure it out. As guests, and Ellen Catane is our new city liaison, replacing Doug Dumais, who apparently had 75 or 80 other committees. He was happy to hand us off. And I see on Compass where he is also an artist and a poet, so that's fabulous. I hope he has more time to do that. Okay, approval of agenda. Any changes to the agenda? I have none. Okay, so entertaining motion to approve the agenda. Thank you, Bill. Anybody second? Thank you, Jamie. Okay, moved by Bill, second by Jamie. All those in favor say yes. Aye, yes, something. Just don't say no. Okay, approval of the minutes, the draft minutes as being accurate. Any changes we wish to the minutes? There you are. Oh. Okay, we'll look for a motion to approve the minutes. Anybody who wants their name in the next minutes? Good work, people. Okay, moved by Robin that we approve these minutes. Who will second that? Thank you, Paul. Moved by Robin, seconded by Paul, that we will approve those minutes. All those in favor say aye. Okay. Business arising from the minutes. The two things that I thought we needed was an update on the short-term rental situation, where it is as it moves through council, and also an update on the affordable housing development incentive changes or plan that was presented in the last at the last meeting here by the mayor. I wrote a letter to planning board that's in your package that advised them of our concerns on both those issues, that our feelings on both those issues, and we appreciate having Mr. Forbes here, having Alex here to give us these updates. Perhaps, and Robert, maybe you can jump in too if you get really bored or something. Thank you.
So on the STR update, I'll just bring you up to speed, and then Robert can. Robert is the person that's working on the policy and what we're doing. You may have read in the paper, Councillor Duffy has stepped down as the chair, so we're just waiting for a new chair to get some files moving and get some direction from council. I think I mentioned before, we work for council, so they set these timelines. But just on the STR, before Robert gives an overview of it, you know, some people may think that there's an inordinate amount of time that between when we had the original public meeting. So that's the scenarios, but there's a lot of other moving parts in this. One is the registration bylaw. We're also concurrently working on if we inspect these properties, what are we going to be inspecting for? The problem is if you go into a Victorian house that's never been inspected, there's really no way you can bring a Victorian house up to the modern code standard. But you need to articulate what are the top, and I'm just throwing that out, what are the top 10 things from a life safety component need to be addressed. So we're working on that. The scenarios, I think, I'd like to speak for council, but that's all teed up in regard to they just need to pick the scenario they want to approve, and then we will craft the regulation around that scenario. But then we'll bring in the registration bylaw, you know, the type of inspections that need to be done, and you know, and then start to move the, you know, that whole file along. When we originally adopt this, there's going to be at the peak of prior to the COVID. I think there was up to 800 STRs that were that they were listing on the website. So, you know, so I think Robert is going to tell you that September we'll know when we get the new chair of the planning committee, because they dictate what's, you know, when to pull the trigger on some of these items. But we feel September will be the time frame. They'll clearly give the community the opportunity to provide feedback. There was some maybe misunderstanding as to what that original meeting was over there at the Confederation Center. Because this is a hot button issue and there's multiple sides to it, prior to going out to the public, that was to kind of get a sense of where the community was holistically on it. Had it changed since COVID? So what needs to be done in order to bring this into force and effect? You need to change the zoning bylaw. It likely the official plan, we'll have to make reference to it in there. You have to bring in this registration bylaw, and there's a few other parts and pieces that Robert will allude to. But I think that's generally where things are, but I'll let Robert update you in regard to what he's been working on and provide some further clarity.
How's his predictive abilities, Robert?
Pretty accurate, I would say.
Good.
Yes, so as Alex mentioned, we'll be proceeding with our report in September for council's review and also for public consultation to elicit their feedback. There are multiple parts when you're looking at developing an STR regulatory framework. Not only do you have to implement the desired policies, so through the zoning bylaw as well as the official plan, which is the community visioning document, you also need to establish a registry in order to have STR operators or hosts register and get an idea of what's actually out there. Now remember, we're doing a two-step verification process where they have to register with the city, and that will be coming in through a licensing framework as well. So one of the requirements is going to be a licensing bylaw that I'm also working on. So similar to the secondary and garden suite registry and bylaw, we'd be looking at something similar where on an annual basis, or at least on an annual basis, if not every 2 years, they would have to, any host or operator or property manager would have to register their property with the city. And then from there would be a list of conditions they would have to adhere to. Part and parcel with that though, and this is very important, is the follow-up for a bylaw enforcement strategy. So the rules are only as good as well as they are enforced. So in order to have high compliance, we need to have a robust enforcement strategy in place. And part of that is we'll have to be working with the province on. I have a report that I'll release, and in fact the data is already out there. When we cross-referenced provincial tourism licenses, over approximately 6% haven't even been registered with PI Tourism. So there is an enforcement issue there that will have to be looked at, and that's quite pivotal and key for this whole thing to work. So that is going to be another separate project entirely, because it won't only be looking at enforcement of STR regulations, but basically enforcement of all bylaws and regulations put down by the city.
Okay, I've been paying really close attention to both of you, but did I miss the when council will decide on which of those scenarios they'll favor for the legislation?
Yeah, so staff will present a report sometime in September, and then council will have we'll provide recommendation with an outline of the regulatory framework, and then council will have the ability to either proceed forward to public consultation, because it'll have to go through council twice. One,
Right.
to proceed to public consultation, and then after the public hearing is held, a decision or disposition on the actual framework itself, listening to members of the public and the feedback received.
Yeah.
So you'll be looking at fall when council's making an actual decision on the regulations for STRs.
So when you say staff will provide and we will provide, is that you, essentially?
I'll be providing the framework that I've been working on the last
Yeah,
couple
so,
months. Yeah.
and you'll make a recommendation of which of those scenarios?
Correct.
And I'm guessing it's council's job to distill that through the public response that they have received over the summer and that evening for sure, and our brilliant letter. And, but your recommendation would be based on what?
My recommendation is going to be presented based on the facts and the data. So
Yeah.
I've taken a look at the data, I've looked at the facts. I've also had multiple correspondence with stakeholders on both sides, both operators and residents that have an opinion on the matter. So I've gone through all of the public correspondence, and like Alex stated, that that May meeting was really just to get the community back re-engaged into the issue, because after COVID it kind of lagged for a bit there. So now that the community's back and engaged, they presented a lot of their opinions and their thoughts on this matter. So I've actually taken a look at all of the responses and I've collated the data. I've looked at the chosen scenario that people have been pushing or putting forward. I've also been in discussions with the province, but the recommendation that I will be presenting will just be based on my own professional opinion on how the STR regulatory framework should be set up, and that's based on, again, like public input, data, best practices from jurisdictional scans across the country, and then my own research.
And council will make their decision, they'll consider your recommendation, but then they could go all over the place,
Correct.
right? Not that they would ever do that, but you know.
We will just put the caveat that we just recommend, right? They decide.
Yeah, for sure.
But to give council their due, I mean, their job is to synthesize much more broadly, all of that input that they're going to get from that public meeting, which will likely take place at the end of September. Again, the public meeting that we had earlier in the year was very helpful to us in regard to the community was telegraphing to us where they wanted to be, so we're going to leverage that as we move forward. And council was at that meeting as well.
So the recommendations and everything that's accumulated thus far, that'll be a big part of it. But then you have your own professional skills and strategies too. Okay, so your recommendation, does that go to that planning committee first?
Recommendation will proceed to planning board, which then will either be supported or an alternative recommendation will be made by planning board, but then that will eventually go to council. I'll set out my recommendation of the framework itself and specifically the policies, and then council will be given the opportunity to either, if they want to advance that recommendation to public consultation, or if they would want us to advance another alternative policy scheme.
Yeah, okay, and I need some clarification on terms, being pretty much a rookie here. So planning board is that big group with community representation as well as council?
Right.
Okay, and that's basically the planning committee, or is the planning committee just council?
Well, no, planning committee is the committee that oversees our department, and that's the mayor, and there's 4 other councilors on that. There's 5, councilors that.
Yeah.
The planning committee sits at the top of the pyramid and directs us in all things planning related. What we do for work, what will happen, moving things forward. The planning board is the actual, the municipalities are empowered to have that. You're right, there's citizen representation. They in turn we recommend to them, they in turn recommend to council.
Yeah.
But again, council they can either differ from staff or they can differ from the planning board.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Robert, are you ready for questions in addition to my just rude interruptions?
Feel free to, you can take any
Okay,
questions.
from people that might have intelligent questions? Yeah. Anybody questions for Robert? Got the process down?
Odd question. So in September, around September timeframe, you make the recommendations to council, and then at that time, they can make a decision whether or not to go to public consultation, is that correct? And then what does that process, like, how long would that process be if they go to public consultation, and then take those recommendations back? So is that another like month or two?
Yeah,
or-
approximately a month. So when you go through a recommendation to planning board and then council, it proceeds to public consultation, so a hearing right after. So the hearing is most likely going to be occurring probably at the end of September.
Okay.
And then once that information and feedback is received from the public, staff then creates another report with that feedback incorporated with a formal recommendation on the actual policy framework. And then that goes before council probably October.
Okay.
Is that just one public meeting?
Right.
Correct. Under the Planning Act, you should require to have one public consultation on an amendment.
Thank you.
Okay, and I suspect that one public meeting will be fairly similar to the other one, same issues.
And a lot of the public may choose just to say, I would like to reaffirm the comments that I sent in
Yeah.
before, right? But,
Yeah.
and again, that is helpful too. You're trying to narrow the discussion, and, the council wants to, if you get 300 people talking to you, it's hard to get a handle on where they are. So the more that it tightens up in regard to giving you a clearer direction, I think, I'm not a politician, but I think it's easier for them.
Okay, so what might our role be there?
You would go to the public hearing, presumably. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not telling you what to do, but you could comment on, you'll watch the process. You would get copies of that planning report that's going to the planning board. Those are all public documents. Everybody has the opportunity. You would read it. You would either concur with the planning staff, you would differ, or you would slightly differ, whatever you wish, and then when you go out to the public hearing, you or somebody here on the committee could speak on the committee's behalf. You could speak individually, but
Okay.
you could provide some direction to them at that time.
So we could, we'll get your report and recommendations when it goes out in the meeting package to planning board. And perhaps we can make sure we get that? Thank you, Bill. Okay, Ellen, you'll throw your weight around or something, make sure that happens? Okay, thank you. Okay, and then I suspect September for us, you're the only one in the room I trust behind me, so that's good. If September for us will be taken up with that, I suspect, as it will be council, as it will, and the Guardian and the and CBC will be thrilled to have news to fill their hours, yeah.
And
Okay.
again, on the September, I mean, it would be much better if either the mayor was here or the chair of planning was giving us our marching orders, because it's going to be a new chair. But this is what we're anticipating. I just thought I'd clarify.
Yeah, exactly, like it could change with
Right.
the change of.
But I do think
principal.
I think council wants to bring this to a conclusion, I mean, because they don't want to lose the momentum from that meeting they originally had. They don't want to get too far between that meeting and the rescheduled public hearing.
Well, just making an editorial comment here, if the purpose of that public meeting was to re-engage people, it was pretty effective.
Yeah.
People seemed pretty engaged, for sure. Okay, more questions for Robert? Robert, you want to say something?
If I could just also provide clarification in regards, like, follow up to Alex's response as well, is that the regulations itself could potentially go September, but I've crafted a report that goes through, basically, it goes through an entire outline, like looking at data, like looking at the housing data, looking at the data we've collected from our third-party software scraping tool. So it would be prudent if I released that report prior to me maybe releasing the recommendations in a formal setting, just because I want council to be very well aware, and the general public very well aware, to read all the data information that's presented in this report, so that they see that when staff does come forward with a recommendation, there's a logical explanation and conclusion why we did.
Where it came from.
Correct. Yeah.
Is that report available now?
I do have it now, but there's a couple of additional things that I want to complete before releasing it.
Yeah, and those reports they have to follow, it's planning board that gets it first, so that's.
Yeah, so we won't, or we will get that report when it goes to planning board also? Yeah, okay.
See no reason why we couldn't have that report.
I think we'd be grateful for that.
Yeah.
Some of us.
Yeah. I think the intention was to have this report published even on our website under the STR regulation portion there. It's just so that with Professor Locksmith's report, my hope is to have this also attached to that same page so that people can read the data there, but then also go through staff's more elongated recommendation report. But there is relevant information in there that sets out the pathway to a post-regulatory world. So yeah, it's very
Okay,
interesting.
that's, other questions for Robert or Alex about STRs? No? Thank you. This way exceeds my expectations for update on STR, where STR is. I really appreciate your time and your commitment to nice work, both of you. Okay, we will move on to affordable housing development incentives update.
So on that, we're going to do the same thing. Robert can kind of, give you a lot more detail in regard to what's happening there. But again, I know that this is a relatively new committee, and
Thank you, Alan.
Just to be able to clarify things. So, the planning department tends to deal with things 100% in the zoning bylaw. This isn't in the zoning bylaw. This is sort of an incentive program outside of the zoning bylaw that's there to either give you some tax relief or give you some building permit relief or whatever. But the two sort of speak to each other in regard to the incentives. You have to meet certain provisions that are in the zoning bylaw. So there's two different streams going on there. So Robert will update you in regard to, and council is reviewing that, your letter that you sent. That will go to all of council.
Right.
So, I'll make sure when we have a new chair, it's one of the things on my list, that we need to make sure that prior to them deliberating on their incentive program, that they've got a copy of that. But that would be for all of council, as opposed to the planning board. But other things may be vetted through the planning board. So with that, I will hand it over to Robert again and just tell you where he is and where the administration is on dealing with that issue.
Okay, thanks.
So currently working in tandem with the City Manager's Office on the Affordable Housing Incentive Program. As Alex mentioned, that tax increment, which is probably the largest financial incentive, would be administered and run from his office, but in joint with our department when we are looking at confirming the number of units in an affordable housing unit development. So a lot of that has to do with tying the affordable housing contracts and rent rolls to occupancy. So prior to us releasing occupancy on a building, if they're claiming that it's going to be affordable units, then they have to provide an agreement from PI Housing Corporation confirming the number of units that's been designated as affordable. One of the largest amendments that are being made to the incentive program that I'm sure everyone is aware of is the definition of affordable housing. And basically it is revising the incentive program to meet the defined term of affordable housing within our zoning and development bylaw. So years ago when we were implementing some amendments to create more affordable options from a development perspective in the bylaw, we defined what affordable housing is or was, and that is through a subsidization program by the provincial government. So that does not include CMHC funded programs. That was based on the formula that they use, which does not translate to affordable rents by any means within our local context. So basically the main drive is to bring that policy that council adopted years ago in line with the defined term of what affordable housing is defined in the zoning development bylaw. So technically bylaw takes precedent because it was not only adopted and passed by council, but it was also signed by the minister. So that is our official take and position on what affordable housing is. So that's provincially subsidized housing units, not CMHC. Now, not to say that we do have a reference to CMHC funded programs in the zoning bylaw for bonus height. So if someone wanted to increase their unit count in the 500 lot area by putting additional stories on a building, we could count CMHC funded units to be part of a bonus entitlement, but they would not be entitled to cash in lieu or no building permit fees. They would not be entitled also to the tax financing as well. So that would only apply to the density itself. So that's going to council next week for review, and we'll see if they approve it. And then pending post meeting, we should have an update on what that incentive program will look like.
So is there discussion about the percentage?
It's confusing. I got about 3 or 4 calls this morning on something that was in the paper, and I tried to grab the paper before
Yeah.
I came here. Apparently, it's a project over on St. Peter's Road, I think. Livingston, is it? Paul Livingston?
Yeah, it's where Livingston Welders.
But $1,385
Yeah.
is the rent they're charging for a so-called affordable housing unit. The
As-
calls I got were unbelievable.
Yeah, the Guardian finally managed this morning to, God love them, to pull out the statement from the minister that this is designed to help middle-income people
Yeah, that's the
afford.
key, yeah.
Yeah, but calling it their definition of affordable housing and people's
Yeah.
definition who don't have it.
The way they had written that up, it just incited people to complain, you know?
Yep, Paul?
I was just gonna say like I said, CMHC's definition of affordable housing is quite a bit different than a lot of people's, and it's really a short-term incentive that they provide, that expires after 10 years. And then the developer can charge what they want after 10 years.
Well, the program that we're administering, when I say
It's only
we,
10% less.
yeah, it's King Square Housing, we have a 25%.
Yeah.
We have like 75 portable subsidies, that we call them,
Yeah.
under the rent supplement program. So that's all federal, and then we built another project where we have some incentives from the province, and they have a guideline as to what rents they expect us to be charging, as you say, or someone said, over a period of 10 years, yeah.
And just to clarify this point, that's why we delegate these discussions to the other levels of government. They're the ones that administer these affordable housing files, sign them off and check them off. We don't have the skill sets, that's why we defer to them. The one that aligns the closest to what we feel in general services affordable housing and other provincial programs, but notwithstanding, the CMHC is a much broader program. It does have a place in the marketplace, but it is confusing when you throw in that term affordable. It is affordable to somebody, but it's not the affordable housing that most people think should be targeted to help people.
And what we're talking about here is subsidized housing. And our definition, I think, is for affordable housing in terms for this committee is much wider. Like, I think we're looking at a housing market even, and we'll look at that in terms of reference in a few minutes.
So the program, rent supplement program, people pay no more than 25% of their income, but there's thresholds on their income for 1, 2, 3 bedroom apartments. So that's all CMHC money, and at the end of the month, we get a big fat check making up the difference,
Yeah.
Would that be called social housing?
I've called it that before.
Yeah.
Good point. Depending on who I'm talking to.
Yeah, and one of our recommendations in the letter that we basically did by email is that the city's affordable housing program incentives only kick in, or the planning committee is recommending only kick in at 3% or less, in terms of vacancy rate. And we recommended that at least 5%. And before we recommended that, like, because the pendulum's way over here, right? And you've got to, in terms of affordable housing availability, and you've got to take the chance that the pendulum will swing the other way, but you got to get it started, for sure. And before even that, Paul, you may want to speak to this, tying affordability of housing to vacancy rates doesn't seem to make sense, like in terms of zoning or anything. Like, because even if your vacancy rate drops, you still can't afford the rents.
Yeah.
So,
The developments that are probably going to be happening right now, well, I mean, maybe they're going to change, but the cost of wood and materials has gone way up, and so
yeah,
in order for the developer to make a return, they're going to charge fairly substantial rents at that point, right? So, I don't know how the issue is resolved, but
Well, it has to make sense to the banking community for sure.
Right.
Like, you know, Martha Place, we're finishing that up now, and we have, what, 2 more apartments to rent. It's important that, yeah.
okay. So that's where the housing development incentive situation is. And that's moving along much faster than STRs, for sure.
That's been around, that policy's been around for some time. It's just,
Yeah,
it's being refined because of some of the discussion we're having here now in regard to the broad nature of the CMHC program. Is that really where, I think council's grappling with, is that really where we want to be targeting our investments?
yeah, you don't want to be giving somebody an incentive on the taxes.
Right.
If the market rents on the
Right,
development is only
right,
10% below the market rate,
Right.
right? And it's whatever that is, so it's 1385 or whatever, but, you know.
But the incentive program isn't new. It's been around for at least 3 or
Yeah.
4 years. And,
It's been around since September 2018.
yeah, so again, it's the refining of it because we hadn't done a lot of CMHC projects, and then when it became more clear as to how broad scope the CMHC program was, it was felt that council needs to really understand the difference between the federally funded ones, the provincially funded ones, and then it decides their job to decide where do they want the resources, which are incentives, who do they want them to receive, both of them, or just directed to the provincial programs?
What is the definition according to the province of affordable housing, and what, does anybody know what they're using?
Is that,
They deal more with 25% of total income rather than 30% pre-tax that CMHC deals with. In relation, you got to remember that CMHC's formula is nationally based. So where you could have a more even distribution of incomes, like income thresholds, like average incomes and stuff, in larger urban centers, that formula might work. In the context of Charlottetown, and I was even talking to the CMHC program administrator of the low interest construction loan program, and he said even Halifax, this doesn't really translate well in terms of affordability. So when we brought in amendments also back in the fall of 2018, we specifically excluded CMHC from the defined term of affordable housing because I was well aware of the formula they used. They have it on their website, and they include that formula in every single contract that they enter into with the developer. So when we were having discussions, I met with the strategic planning committee, and we went through with them in detail on looking at the rent rolls of some of these CMHC low interest loan construction programs and council. So I did throw up the excerpt from the document about the formula. I even threw some examples up of rent rolls for 1 and 2 bedroom units. So council's starting to get a more holistic picture on the different defined terms of what CMHC defines as affordable versus like the local community. So.
any further discussion on this? Paul, you want to go? You have anything else to say? Anybody?
Is there any developers that are actually able to make, not money, but that are willing to develop something at 25% or 30% of someone's income as a rent roll or not? I guess it's that rate though is subsidized by the province then, right? Is that how the difference is made?
Yeah. Well, in order to make our project work, to please the bankers,
Right.
we had to add 10 market rent units.
Right.
So 50 of them are subsidized, 10 of them are market rents.
Right.
In order to make the numbers crunch properly.
Yeah.
Of course, we had got it's a CMHC mortgage. You'd be interested in this, 0.87% over 40 years, renewable every 10 years. Hard to beat.
Yes.
There's also situations where they can include the low interest loan from CMHC, and then they can also proceed with the province on subsidization of some units. So we can get into, and I think we are going to be getting into a situation with one particular development where they're right now in the negotiation with PI Housing Corporation on further subsidizing a number of units within their development. So those units that would be subsidized by the province would then qualify for the affordable housing incentives that the city would be offering.
Okay, I think I'm going to move this along so we can consider terms of reference. Anything else? No? Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Alex, very much so. The draft terms of reference I sent along as part of this package. Paul, is this what we've been working on? I couldn't find. UPI was kind enough to move their, which is where my email and everything is, kind enough to move their email from Gmail to Outlook in about 3 weeks ago. And they did a great job moving it. I didn't do such a good job, so I may have lost something. Anyway, what the draft we have here, there's a couple things that I'd like to change on it, a couple things I'd like to point out also. We're using the 30% here in terms of income, and there's the function basically is pretty clear. The part encourage community awareness, appreciation, partnerships, and support of all of affordable housing projects. We can do that. We would have to take a little bit different tack. And report regularly to Council's Standing Committee for Planning and Development on affordable housing activity, our committee's activities. I'm on the second page here, number 2F. That was like report yearly, and I said report regularly, and that doesn't mean perhaps give them a report, but just keep in contact. Appointments to the board, roles and responsibilities, all that is the way it's been. Chair and co-chair to preside at meetings, blah, 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 okay. And meeting monthly, we decided after everybody sent me when they were available, when they weren't available, that it'd be the third Tuesday of each month. Seemed to be the one where the most of us could be here. We have 4 here of the 7, and we have 5 of the 7, and one regrets today, so I think that'll work. If you miss a bunch of meetings in a row, you get reported to me. I'm not sure. I have to go find my principal's hat, and you get sent to the principal's office when I was in education, and we'll discuss it. Voting, you can have a vote. Also, I added members who are unable, this is in 5, number 1, voting. Section 5, decision making, and then number 1, voting. It's near the end. Members who are unable to attend a meeting may indicate their support or opposition to a resolution at that meeting by email to the chair. So, just because you weren't here doesn't mean you don't have a say, for sure. It may already have been passed, or sometimes it may be waiting to be passed, and you can indicate where you are on that. and the quorum is there. Is there anything else we need to do? We're supposed to report to some committee that I don't know what it is, Alex. What is it?
Planning committee?
No, that one I was kind of clear on. I will find it. My apologies for not being prepared.
Maybe strategic priority?
Maybe, it was Alana Yankoff's
Yeah,
committee.
because this committee was formerly with another
Yeah.
group, and then it would come over to us. So I suspect that there's some overlap in that other committee.
Okay. And so we'll just take that out and put that in as planning board?
Planning committee.
Planning committee.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and that's council committee, just councils.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and there's something in here about missing meetings, and it talks about, that includes, it's obviously a cut and paste right from the council rules. That includes council meetings and subcommittee meetings. Well, we'll just yank that out of there because we're not talking about missing council meetings. And we don't have any subcommittees with any luck, much as I love a good meeting. So with those changes, I'll fix that a little bit. Shall we adopt these as the terms of reference and then send them to whoever we have? Who do we have to send them to? Planning board?
You just send them to us, and we would have planning, and then we would
Okay.
make sure the planning committee was aware of, the recent changes, just as part of the communication with them.
Yeah, okay. So, we need a motion to adopt these, or we can wait till the next meeting when you have time. You've had these for a week or so, and you may need more time to memorize them or whatever. Or do we want to just move it now and I'll make those changes that I mentioned?
I just have a question.
Sure.
It's just a very small housekeeping item. Under the terms of reference, so just the different sections, so number 1 is interpretation, it's just the numbering, I think. 1 is interpretation, 2 is function, 3 is term length, 4 is ending membership and interim vacancy.
Roles and responsibilities, yeah.
Yeah, and then 5,
5 is way down, decision making.
okay, so it must be,
Are we missing something obvious?
just on the, I guess it's just a little confusing, because then we have 4 roles and responsibilities, then we go back to like 1, 2, 3, 4, do you know what I mean?
Okay, so we should change those to letters, right?
Yeah, that's what I was just confused about, there's like 2
Speaking
number
of cut and
4s and
paste.
2 number 6s. Yeah, just change those
Okay.
to letters maybe?
I will
Unless
note
it's-
that, and I will fix that before I send them to Alex.
If maybe I'm the only one that's confused.
No, I was lost completely, and I wrote it.
Yeah, okay,
A part
that's
of it.
all.
Do we have the changes that you mentioned, should we have some kind of a motion amendment, or?
I think we'll just adopt these. We never had anything approved the last time. They said, oh my God, they're too big, or something.
I don't know, I'm easy, I'm just wondering.
I think it's easier if we do it this way. And when I say easier, I mean easier for me, to be honest. Okay, does anybody have a motion that will approve these with the changes as noted?
Well,
Paul, God bless you. Okay, moving along. Seconder? Jamie, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Great, we don't allow any opposition. Okay. Good, thank you very much. One out of my hair. Okay, and goals, work plan and goals. We have 9 whole minutes to discuss this pretty much. Okay, there wasn't any new business. What do we need to look at besides what we look at? Right now, we've been reactive as hell. Like, we had our first meeting on May 11th, and 5 days later or so, there was the public meeting on STRs, and all of a sudden, we're reacting to that. And then Philip came in, or the mayor came in, and with the incentive program for subsidized housing, that the next meeting we had at the end, and said, what do you think of this? And we finally got something together, mostly by email on that. But it'd be nice to be proactive in some areas. What are some areas we would like to be proactive in? And this is like a 2 or 3 meeting process, but we get started.
Do we know when the housing incentive program is going back for council for a vote?
Robert, when is that? When's one of the affordable housing?
It's supposed to be next Monday, I believe, Monday night, the next meeting council.
I wonder if the establishment of the work plan and the priorities is dependent on the outcomes of some of these decisions that are not decided yet. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, okay, so
Yeah.
the way we look at it is to respond to the continuing process on these, or?
Unless, is there work that we need to do as a committee to prepare for that? Or do we develop a work plan, but then it may change depending on the outcome of some of the decisions that are made in September or October? I don't know.
The city did
Just a
say this year
question.
that they're gonna review this annually anyways, right?
Yeah, and part of our work plan may be to remind them.
Yeah,
And-
or just provide advice, I guess,
Yeah.
or suggestions.
Yeah, okay. So why don't we say monitor? We'll continue to monitor the affordable housing and the FTR stuff. STRs.
Yeah.
Okay,
And Mr. Chair, I'll just mention to you something that
Mr. Chair. Great.
that we, it just become available to us recently. I got contacted by a student from McMaster University, and they singled out Charlottetown, and they're looking to create a cross-sectional housing research hub. That's who they are. And it's funded by CMHC, and it's to analyze the scope of Canada's private rental market. And a lot of the problem with this stuff is this information doesn't exist. And Robert mentioned earlier, we just deal with, if you have the data will take you to where you want to go. A lot of cases that data doesn't exist. So she says we specifically aim to fill gaps in knowledge pertaining to the stock of affordable rental dwellings. And then, she says, I'll mention our research objectives, but I don't know how robust this will be, but I just thought I would point out that if they do this, the scraping data is similar to the scraping data we use for SDRs. You go on all the websites, you see who's advertising, and then you're able to assess somewhat how much, affordable housing activity, how big is that market, or, how tight is it? So we may be able to come forward with some data that we didn't have in the past, but it's just,
I think the way that is in my mind, we would be open and willing to respond to requests and initiatives like this. I think the way we're not going to collect the data.
No. All I'm indicating, we're going to do it, staff's going to do it anyways.
Yeah.
But that data that's coming in may be helpful to you
Yeah.
in regard to,
Right.
because all council looks, and I don't blame them, I mean, they're busy. They want us to look at affordable housing as some kind of an equation. How much demand is out there and how much supply is not being, met? When is the equilibrium? When can we tell if it's in equilibrium, or is it over capacity? And that data, historically, hasn't been there. So we're doing our own tracking internally because we're bringing on a lot of new units. This is another tool. We will utilize this tool. I've told this person we'll use it, but the more information we can provide to this committee is better for you folks in regard to all of these incentive programs or whatever. If they're meeting their targets, and then again you're in some kind of equilibrium, I know council would be very pleased to be able to have that information available to them, as I suspect you would as well. So we'll report on it when it comes in.
It would be a valuable tool to inform us, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I've got closely monitor and respond to the affordable housing incentives and STR situations, or as they move through. Bother the hell out of Robert or whatever. Be ready to respond to and consider new data that comes in from various sources, and to assist people as well as we can to gather the data, and whether that's some pressure or influence on up the line on council, say we need this data. We'd like to be able to have a chance for council to make arrangements to collect this.
Aren't we to, though, to take whatever information we have to make recommendations then from that data prior to even sometimes the council making a decision or even discussing it?
Yeah,
You know, yeah.
yeah. Okay. One of the things I think is missing in our last 3 minutes here, one of the things I think is missing from this whole discussion, and it's really easy to say, oh, we can't possibly do that, but is help for renters. Like actual help to people renting. We're focused on, this is pie in the sky stuff, but no use not looking at it. We're focused on development and availability and accessibility and how much we have from the development state perspective, right? I think we need to consider what in the world can we do to help renters or buyers when you look at it in a larger context, but renters for sure. Robert?
If I could just recommend something, Mr. Chair, is possibly, and Halifax went through this process over a year ago, but they totally revamped their secondary and garden suite provisions. So secondary suite is basically a secondary unit contained within a dwelling. Garden suite is basically a dwelling unit that's contained within a detached accessory building like a garage. There is very aggressive moves from other municipalities. I've taken a look at this across Canada that have been looking at enabling more secondary suites and even garden suites because it does, one of two things. It provides the owner of the property a way to subsidize their mortgage to rent, and then it provides an additional rental unit for someone that might not be able to afford a strictly market rent somewhere in the downtown or an entire dwelling unit in some circumstances. So I know that there is a possibility that we could move forward and be a little more aggressive with our secondary suite and garden suite regulations to try to incentivize those more. And I believe there is a market move right now because we're starting to see a lot of new construction building in secondary suites at time of building permit. So there could be a possibility now at looking at, why don't we utilize existing older carriage houses in a lot of the downtown properties where that could easily effectively become another dwelling unit, right? It's close to amenities and services, it's a win-win. So perhaps a recommendation to council proceeding forward to relook at the secondary and garden suite regulations.
Great. So that would fall under help for renters. I don't know what else we would consider, but that's something we would look at. You have anything to say?
I was just gonna add something kind of random. When you were talking about goals, maybe, like it's a little bit further away, but maybe when it gets closer to the STR meeting, we come up with something together that we do want to say there, because I think we should.
Yep.
Something that we can all agree on and one of us can go up. And also, I haven't been as involved with my tenant unity stuff lately, but I can talk to renters and see their point of view. I'm a renter, but
Yep.
I don't speak for all renters.
I'm a renter too, and they put a library right under me,
In
which
the
is
convention
fine.
building?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's loud. And the HVAC
Did you-
unit is from here to there.
Did you see the block that fell in the car?
Yes, that was, I take no credit for that. One thing just before we leave also, I think we have 4 or 5 things that we'll look at for goals and things. And we'll look at a little, even more than 3 minutes next time, maybe all the way up to 7. But, we'll take a look. One thing that came out on Twitter this morning, I realize we're not, doing our decisions on Twitters or anything, but on tweets, but it was just a plaintive plea for help here. And the person says, I'm moving in the early fall, Charlottetown. Despite having a full-time, well-paying job, I can't afford any 1-bedrooms in this city. Rent prices are unsustainable. Are you aware there are basically no 1-bedrooms available for under $1,000 a month? I think what they mean is no 1-bedrooms you might want to live in. Utilities aren't even included, and God forbid you have a pet. Rentals that have popped up that are remotely affordable, $850 to $950, won't accept pets. I have a 10-year-old cat, all she does is eat and sleep. Also, why am I saying 850, 950 is affordable? It isn't. Something's got to give Charlottetown, or something's got to give. Charlottetown, can you point me in the direction of all these affordable units being developed? Because I'm not seeing them. I'm in a relatively privileged position, and I can hardly afford to live in this city. We need a rent cap, we need rent assistance, we need unfurnished, affordable, long-term housing units. In other words, not STRs. Look, I've already given up on being able to buy a house because of stagnant wages, the rising cost of living, and having to rent. At this rate, I can't even put money in a savings account because all my income is going to rent, utilities, groceries, and supporting the local economy. Renters need your support, Charlottetown and PEI government. Landlords have been supported enough at this point, and that was it. And there've been a million responses.
Yeah, that's Andy's tweet, right?
I guess, I don't know who it is.
I just wanted to say about the part where they were saying like the 850, 950. I just had to move out of my apartment that was 850. It's not affordable. I had to leave it. I had to get
No.
a roommate again, and it sucks. It sucks so bad because I won't find that again. Like, and
No.
yeah, I just can't afford it.
Like, that's just a context for what we're dealing with. And we really need to support the people even below that. But
Yeah, I'm
the
really
house.
lucky too. Like, I don't make minimum wage, but like I literally can't picture or imagine what it's like being on social assistance, minimum wage, and trying to just exist.
No. Well, we have to continue to do good work and do our best here. And I think our power is in influence. That's all it is. Just keeping the pedal to the metal and holding the right people accountable, or the right organizations accountable, and doing whatever we can. I don't think we should reject any initiatives that any of us think of. Anything, like goofy stuff. Look at it first, because the smart stuff isn't working too well.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else to say before we draw this to a close? Amen. Motion to adjourn?
Second,
Great.
turn off the.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Third Monday in August, whenever that is.